Hi guys, and welcome to TechFurb. Today we are doing a bit of a different video, and it's a video that I feel that needs to be on YouTube. It's going to be one of those builds. Okay, so what do I mean by one of those builds? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take this Dell Optiplex 3010 and we are going to put it in a normal PC case. Now, you might be thinking, whoa. How's this going to fit in a normal case? It's a proprietary motherboard, it's OEM. Dude, you can't overclock, you can't do things with this. It's terrible. That's why people don't buy these and make them into gaming computers. That's because they're all wrong. So, yes, can't overclock it. You are limited in what you can upgrade it to. But this model, the 3010, and I know the 990 as well, so second and third generation i-series, i5, i7, that sort of stuff, of the Dell models of that era, they are standard ATX, which is fantastic. They're standard ATX in the form factor of the motherboard, so the motherboard will physically fit in an ATX case. But more importantly, the supporting connectors, so your 24-pin power supply connector, your 4-pin CPU connector, they're all bog standard. There's nothing special about them. So you can literally take this motherboard out of this box with the CPU and all the bits in it still intact, put it in the new case, put an awesome graphics card in there, like hell, you could put a 1080 Ti on there if you wanted to. Completely overkill, don't do that, but you can do it. You can also put a crazy over-top power supply in there. You have a lot of options in what you can do. And the reasons why this is really it's something that people should take note of is these machines go cheap. I mean, this machine was so cheap, I got it for free because my work was throwing it out. People, like businesses, they don't want to deal with these old computers. They're just throwing them out at this point, quite literally. So you can pick one of these up, even if you pick it up off the used market, you're paying, what, 100, 150 bucks for one of these machines? That's just phenomenal value. You're going to struggle to find a second or third generation i-series chip in that price bracket. Like, it's just phenomenal. If you can extract the motherboard out of this and pair it with proper graphics cards, proper power supplies, all the supporting parts that you need to make a gaming build, then why not do it? So we're going to examine that. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to pull apart this guy, and we're going to start putting it into the case. I haven't actually done this before, I will clarify that, but I have checked these machines before, and I know that it is possible to do it. So we're going to go ahead and do this, and it's going to be freaking awesome. Alright, so there's always one thing that kind of screws you over these projects. In this build, I mean, a lot of the things are kind of standard, but the one thing that's really got me is kind of fan headers and things like that. The other thing that has me is the CPU cooler. Now, I can work around the fan headers and things like that. We can sort that out. Challenge with the CPU cooler is Dell decided that they wanted to bolt the CPU cooler mount to the chassis. Like, why would you attach that to the case? That's Anyway, I can't just put a stock cooler on it because of the capacitors and the VRMs are kind of hinder the stock cooler. So what we're going to do to counter the lack of ability to screw into anything, we're going to get some motherboard standoffs, and these actually, as you can see here, they actually fit on there. See how that goes on and off quite happily? They actually fit the CPU cooler. So what we're going to do is basically going to mount the CPU cooler, attach these to the back of it, tighten it up, and hopefully that'll keep the CPU cool. Fingers crossed. Otherwise, this build is a bit of a bust. Alright guys, so we've got it all plugged in now. I've got the CPU cooler mounted. It seemed to go okay. We just need to check if the main board still works. There is a slight chance that I've fried something or cracked something. You've got to be really careful with these OEM builds. They're quite janky. This is kind of what I said going into this video. So hopefully this is the only roadblock I have, and hopefully we still have a working system. So looking up on the ultra wide over there, the black screen there that I'm pointing to, hopefully we get a Dell screen and a Windows login screen. So Here's for the best. Oh, there's noise. Means I'm plugged in everything. Hey, we got a Dell screen. Couple of failures, but it skipped it. This is good news. And we got a Windows screen. Alright. So, that means we have a working system. That means the CPU cooler's mounted, and hopefully is actually cooling the CPU and not dodgily mounted. Sod's point, let's get it into its real case. Alright guys, so moment of truth, I've actually got it in the case now. As you can see, we finished the build. I still have a couple more mods I need to do. I need to make the power, the actual power button work with this motherboard. It's a bit janky, so I've got to kind of work out which buttons actually start it. Once we do that, it'll be good to go, but before we do that, we actually need to turn it on and make sure it actually works with the new graphics card and power supply before we touch anything else on it. So, same again on the ultra wide here. We're going to see if we can get it going. Good sign. Hey, we got an output. All right, sweet. So, all right, fantastic. So that's getting into the hard drive now. So that's exactly what we wanted. Everything's all connected up. So, all we need to do now is get the we need to get the power button working. So I'm just gonna drop that down there so you guys can see it. It's this guy here. We just need to get that guy working properly with the actual case button, so I don't have to do like a janky on-off switch like that. So let's get that done. Alright guys, so we finally finished the build now, and it's turned out fantastic. Managed to get all the guts of the Dell system out, put it into the new case. I've also put in there a 750 watt power supply, a GTX 670. So all tested, all working. I just now need to wipe the image on the hard drive and put Windows 10 on there, and then we can run some benchmarks. Now, talking specifications, I actually didn't know the specifications coming into this video of this system that I pulled it out of. It was just a box that was literally getting thrown out at work. So I said, hey, can I take it home? They're like, yeah, sure, we're just going to throw it out. So that worked out fantastic. It ended up being an i5 3470, I believe. which is a great processor. It's not going to bottleneck that GTX 670 at all. And yeah, I mean, I didn't luck out with the RAM though. It's only 4 gig of RAM, so I intend to upgrade that to 16 gig of DDR3. I have a couple of 8 gig sticks lying around. And hopefully this system turns out to be an absolute beast in the benchmarks. So first up, we're going to have Doom. Now, I've decided to compare the Dell 3010 in two separate forms against two other machines. So it's going to go up against my default Ryzen 7 build, that's my personal build, with an RX 480. I've also paired the 3010 with a GTX 670 in addition to the 480. And the reasoning behind that is it gives a reference point of how this CPU scales. You'll notice in one or two benchmarks where there's a CPU bottleneck, and you'll notice that no matter what GPU we use, it's actually bottlenecked by the CPU. And finally, we have the Ryzen 3 1200, which represents, it's paired with a 1050 Ti, and what that represents is a modern budget entry-level system, and it gives a reference point of, is it better price to performance to buy the older 3010 and pair it with a modern graphics card, or to go down the route of a whole new system? Obviously, there's going to be benefits to having a new system, but the point of this video is to try and prove that you can grab one of these older systems and have the performance that you would have if you bought a new entry-level system. So, without further ado, let's just very quickly go over Doom. So, as you can see here, the 3010 is pretty much dead even with the Ryzen 7 when paired with the RX 480. It falls away a bit when paired with the older GTX 670. And finally, the Ryzen 3, again, slightly behind, but that is due to a GPU limitation, not a CPU. It's also important to note that all these benchmarks are run at the highest possible preset, so ultra settings at 1080p, and that is why you're not seeing high frame rates per se. And also remember that these are average 1% lows and 0.1% lows, so I don't do maximum frame rates. So Crysis 3, now this is a benchmark which is notorious for it pretty much kills GPUs, and as you can see here, the CPU is not bottlenecking that RX 480. That's the other way around. The Ryzen 7 and 3010, again, dead even with that 480. And like I was explaining before, the 670 paired with the 3010 is about on par with a 1050 Ti. So next benchmark is F1 2015. Now this is the only exception in this benchmark test, but it shouldn't be treated as such because it does something important. What F1 2015 does is it seems to really love CPU, and it will bottleneck no matter what CPU you use. So as you can see in the graph here, the Ryzen 7 1700 modern processor cleanly outstrips any of the other CPUs in this roundup, and as you can see, paired with that RX 480, it just runs away with this benchmark. And then you notice with the Dell 3010, even with the GTX 670, it's pretty close between the 670 and the 480, and you can see the minimums are pretty much on par between both GPUs, which shouldn't be the case, and the average is slightly higher, but that would be in sections where the GPU is able to not be bottlenecked by the CPU. So as you can see here, this is a real world CPU bottleneck, and F1 2015 really punishes these older CPUs. And as you can see, the Ryzen 3 1200 with a lower spec GPU is able to outstrip the 3010 with a higher spec GPU. So this is the one drawback of having a system like the 3010 turned into a gaming system, is you are bottlenecked by that older CPU architecture. And of course, we can't overclock to compensate for that. So next benchmark is GTA 5, and this is return to norm. We're seeing the 3010 with an RX 480 able to match the Ryzen 7. And this is a bit of an anomaly in my test suite as well. I run the game at 4x MSAA with high preset at 1080p, of course. And as you can see here, pretty even match between the CPUs running with the 480, 1050 Ti with the Ryzen 3 outstrips the GTX 670 with the 3010. Not a whole lot to draw from the 1% lows, so we can see that it is clearly a GPU bottlenecked game. So next benchmark, Battlefield 1, and this is the first benchmark we see where on average frame rate the 3010 does outstrip the Ryzen 7 1700. Again, within margin of error, there is always slight differences in benchmark runs, and that is what you're seeing here. The 1% lows and the 0.1% lows kind of identify tell the real story, and you can see it's slightly higher on the Ryzen 7, but once again proving that that 3010 paired with an RX 480 is pretty much on par with a modern gaming system. And then you can see that typical scaling of the 670 lagging just behind the 1050 Ti. So next benchmark. Watch Dogs 2. Now this is an incredibly punishing game at max settings, and you'll see here that it's dead even between the 1700 and the 3010 in pretty much every regard actually. So very much a GPU limited game, and you can see the GTX 670 just can't run this game pretty much at all on max settings at 1080p, just highlighting that it is a pretty old graphics card. And you can see the 1050 Ti as well starting to show that it is a budget graphics card, and it really struggles at max settings. So next benchmark is Dirt Rally. Now Dirt Rally is a bit of a funky one. I don't get it sometimes. You'll notice that it's pretty even between the Ryzen 7 and the 3010, but doesn't really have a whole lot of scaling with the GPUs, so I'm not really sure what to make of this game. VSync was definitely turned off, but yeah, it's pretty close even, so maybe just a bit of an anomaly of a game. But it is a benchmark, and it does give us some data. So final GPU, it's a synthetic test, Unigine Valley, and you can run this yourself. It is free to download. The preset I use is the 1080p Extreme, and as you can see here, that the 3010 slightly pulls away from the 1700, which was interesting, and then you can see the scaling of the 670 slightly ahead of the 1050 Ti. Maybe just a specific benchmark, but this is a benchmark where the CPU does not bottleneck the graphics cards, and that's why I like to include it. So moving now to Cinebench R15. Cinebench R15 now kind of shows pure CPU, so GPU is irrelevant. And as you can see, it's a bit unfair comparing the Ryzen 7 because it is an 8-core 16-thread processor. So in a multi-core benchmark, that's just going to be in a league of its own. But it is very interesting to see the Ryzen 3 1200 up against that 3010 because they're both quad-core CPUs, and what you're seeing here is a little bit of a performance increase on the Ryzen 3, but it's not astronomical. So it kind of shows that the 3010 is really not that far behind a budget entry-level CPU that is manufactured today, which is fantastic news for someone who's using an older system, or if you're looking to turn the 3010 into a gaming system. So yeah, that's fantastic news on the CPU front. And finally we move to Ryzen Blender. Now this is again not a GPU limited, and is probably more of a real world workload, and as you can see, the Ryzen 7 just cleanly runs away again. All those threads, all those cores makes a big difference, and there's quite a big margin between the Ryzen 3 and the 3010 in this one. So again, we're seeing that the CPU is a bit older, but it is not that far off the mark per se. It can still keep up with the newer CPUs when it needs to. So that is the benchmarks, and we'll roll on to the conclusion. Okay guys, so benchmarks finished now, and basically I guess I've kind of come to the conclusion about the 3010. So I've pretty much relegated the old case to just a monitor stand at this point, but for the 3010 that's in here, pretty much I've come to the conclusion that it's a reasonably good idea. It is something that does require a bit of knowledge, so if you're someone who's never built a computer before, please do not try this. It is quite complex. There's a lot of just kind of experience that's required. The biggest troubles that I had was the CPU mount, the power buttons as well. I also had issues with fan headers because they're not standard fan headers, so I can't just put a standard case fan in it, which also meant I couldn't put a custom cooler on it because, again, not standard fan headers. I'd have to either have some sort of special Molex to 4-pin fan adapter or some other solution to rewire it to fit the motherboard. But other than that, it worked out fantastic. The price performance is pretty much unbeatable. I mean, for the price you can get a 3010 for as a whole complete system is pretty much the price you're going to pay for just a CPU. Entry level, like a Ryzen 3, would work out about the same cost just for the CPU itself. So overall, you cannot beat the value.
In terms of gaming performance, it was pretty phenomenal. It was right on par with my Ryzen 7, all bar the F1 2015 game and a couple of others. But to be honest, no complaints. It really didn't bottleneck my mid-range graphics card, so thumbs up. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. Sorry it's a bit of a long video, but leave a like if you liked it, leave a dislike if you disliked it, leave a comment down below if you have any suggestions or future updates. Also, a bit of a plug, forum.techfurb.com, get on it. It is new forums that I've set up for my TechFurb viewers. I want you guys to get on there, I want you to ask me questions, I want you to just be involved. It is something I've created to really bring together the people that kind of follow my videos. I get a lot of questions on YouTube, and I love it, but it is very difficult to respond to that, so I thought a forum would be a fantastic outlet for that. So I'll pop a link down in the video description below. So thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.